Hello. Having immediately pre-ordered when they were announced at the end of July 2022, my Sonic Models GWR Large Prairie arrived this week. There aren't any DCC factory-fitted options with these, though the exclusive retailer, Rails of Sheffield, do offer a DCC fitting service. I decided to fit a decoder myself, to save money and avoid waiting longer to get my hands on the model. First things first, a scan of the instructions. It says to run the model in each direction unloaded for 1 hour, which is longer than other manufacturers recommend, but I think it's always best to follow the provided instructions. I didn't notice until it shipped, but the Rails of Sheffield information about this model says it needs a 90-degree 6-pin decoder, so I hastily ordered one and it arrived the day after the loco. It's a Bachmann EZ command decoder. I've put a link in the description. About fitting DCC, the instructions say, to fit a DCC decoder, the body needs to be removed. To do this, as shown to access the securing screw. Once this is removed, the body can be levered up and the securing. Okay, that's fairly garbled English and makes me wonder how much effort has been put into these instructions, or attention to their detail. Anyway, the picture and annotations show that the boiler support rods need to be opened. The arrows show the rods need to be pulled away from the boiler. I often fit decoders at the railway, but I had a feeling this one was going to be fiddly, so I did it over some spongy foam at a table. The boiler support rods pull out from the boiler fairly easily and rotate where they connect to the frame, which I think is good because it means they're less likely to snap. I used tweezers at this point, but I think to avoid scratching the paint something plastic or wooden would be better, a cocktail stick for example. To get to the screw that secures the body, the rear pony wheels need to be removed. The instructions don't say how, but it turns out they just pull out quite easily. Once the body screw is out, the body lifts off quite easily. From the cab end first, there's a little latch under the smoke box. Neither the decoder, the circuit board in the loco, nor the blanking chip have numbers against the pins or sockets. There's a white circle at one end of the blanking chip and also at one end on the decoder. Those seem to denote pin 1, which is at the right hand side of the loco. The decoder instructions show a dot next to pin 1. If you're using this decoder, it's the only way around that it will fit anyway. Once the decoder's in, it's worth testing that everything works. So, back to DCC for the railway, and everything seems to work on the default address 3. I tried programming the loco to a new address on main, but it didn't have any effect, so maybe that's not something that this decoder supports. Those were the easy bits. Now to put everything back together. The main body slots back on fairly easily. You just need to be careful about where you're putting pressure on the top to avoid breaking details. The pony wheels push back on easily enough. I tried carefully for a while to get the boiler supports back in, but I just couldn't see the holes in the black smoke box, or where the ends of the fine black wire were, even with a bright light and a magnifying glass. I was being gentle, but the metal tweezers did scratch some paint off one of the wires. This just wasn't happening. I had to wait until broad daylight the next day. With a bright light, a magnifying glass and broad daylight, I did eventually succeed, using a wooden cocktail stick. I could barely see it myself, let alone get it on camera. The technique that seemed to work was to vertically line up the support with the hole, which it pretty much does by itself, and then push it horizontally along to the hole with the cocktail stick. As you push it along, it bends a little, so when it reaches the hole, it springs into it. I really wouldn't want to do this many times. It seems inevitable the supports would snap eventually. My first impression of this loco is that it runs well. It hasn't stalled or stuttered on me at all so far. By itself, it doesn't run completely smoothly. It's not stalling, but it seems to have a bit of an oscillating speed. The 2 hours of running in didn't make any perceptible difference to how it runs. nor has fitting DCC, but I don't see any speed variations when it's pulling coaches. When testing it on points, there was one occasion where it seemed to get stuck briefly before sorting itself out. I ran it over that section of point work several times again and it was fine. That was the only time it had an issue on point work. I didn't get a close look at it, but perhaps the pony wheels got jammed somehow. So far, I'm very pleased with it. It's a welcome addition to my GWR fleet. That's all for now. Bye bye.